This is Take 5 with Bentley, Nevada. In the studio today again is Darren Evans, Global Hardware Commercial Leader for Bentley, Nevada, with a specific emphasis on the Orbit 60 platform. Darren, it's good to have you back. And last time we talked a little bit about condition monitoring modules and protection modules and this idea of producing and consuming data on the backplane. And there's a lot of things in Orbit 60 that make it very different from its predecessors. I'd like to talk next about some functionality that a lot of customers are going to ask about. Bentley Nevada's historically introduced systems with kind of core functionality, radial vibration and thrust and phase triggers and so forth. But there's some other applications out there, and one of them is for the power generation industry. And I realize that thermal power plants are kind of a dying breed, if you will, but steam turbines are by no means dead. I mean, they're going to be around for a long time, and there's special measurements that are made on these big steam turbines. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit and Orbit 60's capacity to deal with those kinds of measurements.
Yeah, sure. So in the first release of Orbit 60 in the fall of 2021 here, we're really aligning to the core functionality: radial vibration, thrust, key phaser, temperature inputs, discrete inputs, relay outputs, protection, condition monitoring functionality, really the core of the platform. As we get into the spring of 2022 is when we're going to be introducing the more TSI measurements that you would experience for like steam turbine applications. That's differential expansion, case expansion, eccentricity, and the list goes on and on around specific measurements for those steam turbine applications. That'll be complementary in the release next spring. There'll be a few new modules that are going to come out specific to that functionality. For the most part, the existing modules that are coming out this fall will have that functionality added to them to be capable of doing monitoring measurements for those steam turbine applications.
Now, you mentioned the acronym TSI, and for people that maybe aren't in the power generation sector, describe that acronym for us.
Yeah, turbine supervisory instruments, and it really does come down to around steam turbine applicability and how you'd measure those particular assets.
Okay, and that functionality is coming in spring of next year then?
Yeah, late spring of next year.
Okay, well, very good. There's also, so just like there's a specialized suite of measurements for TSI, as you get into, say, the hydro and reciprocating compressor type measurements, you also have these kind of specialized measurements. I wonder if you could talk just a little bit about kind of the, looking forward in the roadmap, if you will. When is some of this functionality going to be released in the platform?
Yeah, if you look at 3500, I mean, it's been out there for nearly 25 years, right? And you can imagine all the upgrades that system has had over the years. And to have a system that is introduced to the market, to have everything 3500 has is an overwhelming task, right? So with this first release this fall, we have a great functionality, core functionality coming into the platform. And I mentioned in spring, we're bringing that TSI functionality in. We do have a roadmap that's going to bring in additional capabilities of the system. One of those is recips, for example, that's scheduled for the fall of next year, 2022. And the great story there is from a functionality or an Orbit 60 hardware architecture standpoint, when we release recip functionality, there's not going to be one new piece of hardware that's required that's not released today. And it's just going to be firmware upgrades to the existing components in the system. And it really allows our customers to have a simplified spare parts architecture, simplified parts across one asset to the next. And we're really excited about the recip capabilities that are going to come out with Orbit 60. And if you get into other applications like hydro, there's plenty of hydro applications that could utilize Orbit 60 this fall in our initial release that are just doing radial vibration, they're doing thrust and those type of core measurements. When you get into things like air gap and other functionality like that, the specialized measurements, that'll be coming in the fall of next year as well.
Okay. Well, I'm fascinated by this idea of almost like on-the-fly upgrades where the modules don't need to change. The hardware can remain as it is. And it's maybe a way to think of it is it's almost like a new app you can load into that hardware when the firmware is released.
Absolutely. That's our vision is 2 releases every year, spring and the fall. We'll bring new functionality to the system. So if you're a customer that already has an Orbit 60 platform and you want to gain new functionality that comes out in the future, it's simply a firmware upgrade.
Well, look, Darren, I definitely want to have you back in to visit a few more topics we've got around this great platform. And with that, you've been listening to Take 5 with Bentley, Nevada, a Baker Hughes